published Authorial signature. There we go. So it predominantly concentrates on American Beauty, The Revolutionary Road, and Away We Go. Overall, it focuses on Mendes' portrayal of the ideal home and how it's substituted by the dysfunctional family, whilst exploring the notion of escapism. It makes use of relevant interview material that revolves around the director's background and personal life to demonstrate his incentives and aspirations. And it also engages with the theory identified by film theorist Peter Wallen as Auteur structuralism in Signs and Meaning in Cinema. We're just going to talk a little bit about Wallen's theory. So it uses a structural approach to define the core of repeated motives in the work of an auteur. In his theory, structuralist criticism cannot rest on the perception of resemblance or repetition, but it must also comprehend a system of differences and oppositions. So in other words, the theory doesn't only rest on the perception of resemblance within a body of work, but instead encourages the work to be analysed through its differences and oppositions of the presented images and narrative aspects, rather than merely focusing on a singular aspect of the auteur's artistic vision. So when analysing Mendes' work, its most distinctive characteristic is the recurring subject of home, which often centres the characters in an environment where they feel imprisoned, and their goal throughout the narrative is to break free. Also, when taking the theory into consideration, Mendes' work is usually structured around the subject of the ideal home versus the dysfunctional family. And we have some of the recurring themes within some Mendes' work here. So we're going to talk about the characters within his work, who tend to seek escape from the dominant ideals of the nuclear family. So the female protagonists, such as April, played by Kate Winslet in Revolutionary Road, and Verona, played by Maya Rudolph in Away We Go, are merely labelled to be devoted housewives who are expected to reproduce and raise their children, as well as lead ordinary lives alongside their husbands, having no ambition to think otherwise. The desire to escape can be narrowed down to the fear of passivity and falling into the trap of social norms. We also have the tendency of escapism, which is evident in American Beauty, and particularly in the character of Lester, played by Kevin Spacey, who becomes suddenly infatuated with his teenage daughter's friend, Angela. Consequently, his reserved and insecure personality is transformed into an impetuous figure that results in him quitting his job and subsequently confronting his wife. Also, the characters within Away We Go spend the entire narrative searching for a home to live. So we have Bert and Verona, who spend the majority of the narrative trying to change their lives by finding the right place to raise their unborn daughter. The audience is presented with a number of different families that essentially demonstrate numerous ways of parenting. Mendes perceives the film as a companion piece to Revolutionary Road, since he optimistically concludes to the persistence of hope, even during the portrayal of eccentric characters who appear to be completely naive on the subject of parenting. Also, we have domestic conflicts between the characters, and that is evident in American Beauty, and we're just going to watch a little clip of a dinner scene within the film.
Sorry I'm late.
No, that's quite all right, dear. Your father and I were just discussing his day at work. Why don't you tell our daughter about it, honey?
Janie, today I quit my job. And then I told my boss to go fuck himself, and then I blackmailed him for almost $60,000. Pass the asparagus.
Your father seems to think this kind of behavior is something to be proud of.
And your mother seems to prefer that I go through life like a fucking prisoner while she keeps my dick in a mason jar under the sink.
How dare you speak to me that way in front of her? And I marvel that you can be so contemptuous of me on the same day that you lose your job.
I didn't lose it. It's not like, whoops, where'd my job go? I quit. Someone pass the asparagus.
Oh, and I want to thank you for putting me under the added pressure of being the sole breadwinner now.
I already have a job.
No, don't give a second thought as to who's going to pay the mortgage. mortgage. We'll just leave it all up to Carolyn. You mean you're going to take care of everything now, Carolyn? Yes, I don't mind. I really don't. You mean everything? You don't mind having the sole responsibility? Your husband feels he can just quit his job and you don't...
Will someone please pass me the fucking
guys,
asparagus?
I'm not going to be a part of this.
Sit down!
I am sick and tired of being treated like I don't exist. You two do whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, and I don't complain. All I want is the same...
Oh, you don't complain? Oh, please, excuse me. I must be psychotic then. If you don't complain, what is this? Yeah, let's bring in the laugh meter and see how loud it gets on that one. You don't complain.
Don't interrupt me, honey. And another thing. From now on, we're going to alternate our dinner music because, frankly, and I don't think I'm alone here, I'm really tired of this Lawrence Welk shit.
So, as demonstrated in the scene, the family conflict occurs due to Lester's ruthless behavior over the fact that he's quit his job, which causes chaos that involves frustration and foul language between the characters. Also, narratives explore different concepts of family, including dominant ideals of a nuclear family. For example, Revolutionary Road centers around a family of 4, including a housewife, and her working spouse, and their children, a daughter and a son. Lastly, we have the characters who tend to have the fear of being ordinary. So, for example, April in Revolutionary Road states, "Our whole existence here is based on this great premise that we're special and superior to the whole thing, but we're not. We're just like everyone else," which is a statement that demonstrates a desire to escape her current state of affairs due to the concern of being common. Just to conclude, Mendes invites the audience to reassess the concept of the self and the conditions in which it is produced by providing a glimpse of disillusionment and sadness in the suburbs. He encourages the viewer to reconsider their home status by engaging with their identity and what contributes to their incentives. He has previously stated that American Beauty, Road to Perdition, and Revolutionary Road are all statements on parenting in various sorts, and they're all very different. And an example of so is evident within Away We Go, and we're just going to watch a very quick peek.
Beckett, what is that?
That's a fern.
That's right, this is a fern. What's that?
That's a cactus.
That's a cactus. That's right, and what is the plural of cactus, huh?
Cacti.
That's right. What is that? What is that?
Baby.
That's right, that's a baby. This lady is about to have a baby, huh? Any day now.
4 and 3 months. Thank you.
Beckett, hey, tell the nice lady what you know about babies. No, go on, tell the nice people what. Beckett, you're being rude.
Babies like to breathe and they're good at hiding it. I put a pillow over a baby. I thought she wasn't breathing, but she was. She was sneaky, but I'll try again.
So, as we can see in the scene, the son appears to have no concept of how babies in fact breathe, which can predominantly be blamed on the mother and how she is projected as an awful parent and quite naive on the subject of parenting in general. Lastly, Mendes has also stated, "I don't want to be known for one thing. I don't want to have an adjective based around my name. Lynchian, I know what that is, but there isn't going to be a Mendesian." Arguably, by now, Mendesian cinematic style has already been established through this continuous exploration of the forever changing subject of home, which has evidently established his authorial signature as he equally presents to the audience a variety of family perspectives within his narratives, whether ideal or dysfunctional. However, as his characters are reduced to a set of domestic conflicts that are embodied within family cliches, so is his work limited to the private domain of the home, which can be perceived as claustrophobic and worn out. And that is about it.
Cool. Welcome everyone. Today I'm presenting a section from a chapter of my final year dissertation. It was about surrealism, the aesthetic of surrealism in contemporary cinema. And this presentation focuses on the way in which David Lynch's films, particularly Blue Velvet, have been predominantly analysed through psychoanalytical means. And I'm going to argue the point that his scenes offer different interpretations if you look at his film as a surrealist piece of art, and not just by not constrained to psychoanalytical analysis. I have my own definition of the aesthetic of surrealist cinema that's been translated into the cinematic language, using my interpretation of various definitions offered originally by André Breton and other pioneers of the artistic movement. Perhaps one of the most acclaimed surrealist filmmakers since Louis Buñuel is American auteur David Lynch, who has had an impressive career as an award-winning filmmaker and a painter and musician. He presents to viewers a surreal, often nightmarish perspective that allows us to experience the world of film in an entirely new way. Devlin writes in his extract of the philosophy of David Lynch, suggesting that Lynch presents a surreal experience to his spectators. However, later within this collection, it is stated that Lynchian logic is twisted and chaotic, similar to a surrealist visual artist's approach. The claim that Lynchian aesthetic is only similar to that of a surrealist is exceedingly debatable. And this research would seek to propose he as an artist, is creating surrealist cinema. Devlin and Brace and various other academics examine the philosophy of Lynch's films, and in both pieces of critical literature, they allude to surrealism but do not comprehend this as a major part of his underlying philosophy. If you play this is the opening scene from Blue Velvet.
She wore blue velvet, bluer than velvet was the night, softer than satin was the light from the stars. She wore blue velvet, bluer than velvet were her eyes, warmer than May her tender sighs. Love was ours, love I held tightly, feeling the rapture grow, like the flame burning brightly. But when she left, gone was the glow of blue velvet. But in my heart there'll always be gracious and warm love.
When considering Blue Velvet, its general aesthetic seems deeply influenced by surrealism. Its visual style, rich with surrealist imagery, and its underlying philosophy, one correlating with notions of surrealist philosophy. However, in academic discourse, Blue Velvet has been consistently confined to a psychoanalytical analysis. Ishi Gonzalez suggests, almost without fail, mention of two central psychoanalytical tropes, the Oedipus complex and the primal seed, within Lynch's work. In The Horrors of Life, Hidden Mysteries, Blue Velvet, Sandra H. Lee states that the Oscar-nominated film's underlying themes share many elements with that of the psychoanalytical inquiry proposed by Arthur Schopenhauer into humanity's innate will. Schopenhauer believed that everything that exists is a manifestation of the force that he called the will. This will is fundamentally spontaneous and irrational. Schopenhauer presented a pessimistic approach to the human will, stating, now the nature of man consists in the fact that his will strives, is satisfied, strives anew, and so on. In fact, his happiness and well-being consist only in the transition from desire to satisfaction and from this to another fresh desire. This desire or will, as Schopenhauer terms it, is suggested to be the primary drive in human nature towards the pursuit of satisfaction and happiness. Schopenhauer's will is also made up of our worst impulses, the irresistible nature of violence and sex, and that drives most of us as we try to hide behind the veneer of civility. The suggestion is that as much as we try to repress these impulses through rational thought, this will or desire is too overpowering for us. Lee aligns Schopenhauer's notions with Blue Velvet, and particularly the opening scene. In the opening scene, we see that humanity attempts to pretend that life is beautiful and serene, purposeful and happy. The opening shots are of blue velvet as the blue velvet drapes dissolve into the sky. You see the roses on the backdrop of the picket fences. And it's just and he'd be presented with this idyllic suburban setting in America. The town is cloaked in a facade of cliches. A bright red fire engine drives down the street combined with shots of vibrant roses. Until a man, later revealed as the protagonist's father, drops dead as he is watering the flowers, which motivates the camera's eye to delve into the depths of the grass, accompanied by an ominous score is a feasting mass of black insects. The audience is presented with these two juxtaposing sequences, the satirically idyllic American suburbs and a seething mass of black insects. For Schopenhauer, human life, like all animal life, is best characterized by a senseless brutality, by nature's seemingly uncaring process of violence, illness and death. For Lee, the feasting insect sequence symbolizes Schopenhauer's notion on humanity's irrational will, which seeks only to satisfy these primal desires. However, within this opening sequence, this can be understood as a surrealist one, as it creates a process of dissociation amongst the spectator, a concept previously suggested to be an integral part of the surrealist aesthetic. According to Breton, the process of dissociation involves the fortuitous juxtaposition of two disparate realities, creating an element of shock or surprise. This notion appears entirely applicable to the opening scene in Blue Velvet, as we are presented with these two juxtaposing sequences displaying two incongruous realities. Through the visual aesthetic of surrealist art, pioneers such as Salvador Dali and René Magritte transform surrealism into an evanescent category denoting strangeness, incongruity, and juxtaposition. Understanding Lynch's scene through the means of surrealism, through the means of surrealist analysis, draws its examiners to the emotional response created by such a strangeness and incongruity. The latter image of the insects intends to shock and create an overwhelming emotional response of terror, constructing the underlying tone for the rest of the film, as it clearly juxtaposes with the idyllic scenes that precede it. Michael Gold in Surrealism and Cinema states that one sees images and makes certain emotional connections in one's mind. If the vision revealed is too much for the rational mind to absorb, too intense, too threatening, or too real, yet cannot be rejected, then it leaves the consciousness and it exists on a sublime level as pure surrealism. Gold's conception of surrealism seemingly shares similarities with that of Schopenhauer's philosophy recited by Lee. Rational thought's failed attempt to nail the overpowering truth. This truth is what Gold suggests as pure surrealism, where Schopenhauer claims that this is the primal desire of mankind. Lynch saw intention to create an overwhelming experience with this much analysed opening scene. The first moments of beauty and serenity symbolise rational thought with the juxtaposition of the two scenes posing the insects as the threatening truth behind the peaceful surface. This is Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Zizek, and he just analyses another section of Blue Velvet, and it's just another example of how the analysis of the film is constrained to psychoanalysis.
Dorothy's apartment is one of those hellish places which abound in David Lynch's films. Places where all moral or social inhibitions seem to be suspended, where everything is possible. The lowest masochistic sex, obscenities, the deepest level of our desires that we are not even ready to admit to ourselves, we are confronted with them in such places.
Spread your legs. Wider. Now show it to me.
You get the idea. He kind of, that's from an extract from a film called The Poet's Guide to Ideology. He sort of just analyses lots of scenes throughout Blue Velvet through psychoanalysis. And much like Lee, he neglects the surrealist aesthetic evident within Blue Velvet and could somewhat hinder his critical analysis of particular moments or images. In the scene where protagonist Jeffrey, played by Carl McClacken, finds a severed ear in a field, Lee states that this image plays a role in communicating the themes of his argument aligned with Schopenhauer's. The camera lingers on the ear sitting in the field, discoloured and covered with crawling bugs, as though it just was another object in a world of objects, although we are clearly aware that it's not. Lee suggests that through Jeffrey's perspective, we are naive to humanity's innate brutality, symbolised by the severed ear, as he is. As apt as this analysis may be, as Jeffrey does appear somewhat naive to the criminal underworld he stumbles upon later in the film, examining the image of the severed ear as a surrealist one offers a different interpretation to the film's philosophy. The severed ear, Crawling with Ants, also recalls the sliced eyeborn ants of Unchien and Lou, one of the most famous surrealist films in history. As is stated, the surrealists were fond of the use of bodily organs in their work. The eye became a much-loved image of the surrealist aesthetic. Ramona Fortiod proclaims that Buñuel and Dali made use of technical innovations, dissolves, superimpositions, iris shots, and so forth. These shots were not just a display of technical competence, but they were intended to enhance the impression of film as a visual exploration of the unconscious. As in the great surrealist classic Unchien and Lou, Lynch frequently seems to use principles of dissociation as rationale for narrative movement and montage. The story begins with Jeffrey finding a decaying ear in the field, which is that one in the image there, and towards the end of the film, in close-up again, the camera is focusing on Jeffrey's ear as it slowly falls back into a wide shot as the audience watches the protagonist as he sleeps in his deck chair, offering two images of the ear on either spectrum of the film's narrative. I would suggest that everything that happens between these two shots of both ears all takes place within Jeffrey's dream world. Jeffrey's sadomasochistic and violent subconscious. Both these significant shots mirror each other in a sense. One is a slow zooming close-up into the decaying ear, whereas the other one is a slow panning out into the world, which represents the kind of move out of this dream world into reality. The pullback out of Jeffrey's ear is supported by a harmonious score of Mysteries of Love by Julie Cruz, suggesting that this is a supposedly liberating experience, a notion that was part of the surrealist obsession first explored in Unchien and Lou, that love is the driving force of human existence. Love and liberation play an integral role in the philosophy and aesthetic of Blue Velvet, relating to the underlying themes of surrealism, further inciting Lynch's role as a surrealist. To conclude, the aim of this presentation, the overall work, was to add to the seeming shortage of academic discourse on David Lynch's role as a surrealist artist, with an analysis of Blue Velvet, removing the constraints of a typical psychoanalytical approach.
This is my presentation about how David Fincher constructs his authorial signature. I did this in my second year in the Screen Authorship module, and we learned about how auteurs or authors of the film construct their films. And the question I chose to do was, David Fincher films appear to be a comment on masculinity. How does Fincher's critique of masculinity within his body of films help construct his authorial signature? Firstly, to clarify what an authorial signature actually is, it relates closely to the Auteur theory, and the Auteur theory was developed by a group of critics that wrote for the French film magazine Cahiers du Cinéma, which was established in 1951. The critics included André Bazin, Jacques Daniel Valcroze, Joseph-Marie Leduca, and Francis Truffaut, and others. Francis Truffaut, however, became renowned for his brutal criticisms on the work of French filmmakers in the mid-20th century. In 1954, Truffaut wrote the article Une certaine tendance du cinéma françois, which was essentially a critical attack on the current state of French cinema at the time. Truffaut and others proposed that a director is the true author of a film. In other words, the director is the artist of the film that he or she made, and the Cahiers critics argued only great directors were able to produce films that had an artistic style of film that could be identified as a group of films from an individual director. This catapulted the Auteur theory into film studies, and this theory eventually made its way into American film criticism, and one of the first American critics to write on the subject was Andrew Sarris, and he described the theory to be a polemical weapon that Truffaut wielded in his critical arguments that supported the Auteur theory and his critique of filmmakers who he deemed worthy of the Auteur title and those who did not. Many of the critics shared the same basic principle of the Auteur theory. However, each Cahiers critic had their own critical interpretation. For example, the French critic Alexandre Astruc created the phrase camera stylo, or camera pen, as he used his critical phrase as a metaphor to describe that a director uses the camera in the way of a pen because the director is creating his or her vision in film. More to the point, the theory allows a new process of study into the analysis of a director's films. Many have criticised the Auteur theory for its broad definition, and it is still in need of complete clarification. Theorist Peter Woolen said the theory is a loose framework of common attitudes. Woolen also posits the Auteur theory does not limit itself to acclaiming the director as the main author of the film. It implies an operation of decipherment. And it is this operation of decipherment that relates to what I am suggesting about David Fincher's authorial signature. The authorial signature is essentially a reformed and modernised version of the Auteur theory, and by critically analysing the way Fincher critiques masculinity within his films, by using Woolen's method, we can begin to see how Fincher is constructing his authorial signature, and Woolen's method consists of a few basic principles. By using what he terms as the structural approach, this will allow one to examine the way a director will exhibit the same thematic preoccupations, the same recurring motifs and incidents, the same visual style and temp. One must also examine the differences of a director's films, studying them in terms of their disparity as well as their correlations. As an example, Woolen provides a detailed account of the films created by the director Howard Hawks. Woolen identified that Hawks limits his genres to two basic types, what he calls the adventure drama and the crazy comedy. Woolen identified a structure that Hawks established within his films that expressed inverse views of the world through the Hawksian vision, which became a part of his authorial signature. Woolen then contrasts Hawks' structure to the structure he identified in John Ford films that he describes as transcendent values in the historic vocation of America as a nation through the heroism of Ford's protagonists. Now then, it could be argued that David Fincher also creates two structures, and these two structures are what I have called the inadequacy structure and the deprivation structure. In my case study, I've identified that Fincher expresses views about masculinity in a very distinct way, and he challenges masculine norms and ideals, and he tests the strength and power of his male characters. In other words, masculinity is a fragile and weak concept that is portrayed in the Finchian vision or the Finchian world. The protagonists play a central part in the way these structures operate. The lead characters tend to overcome problematic issues, situations, circumstances, and challenges within the narrative. And while Fincher's unfortunate, normally male protagonists are attempting to accomplish these gruesome tasks, this becomes a process for the protagonists to reclaim or restore their deprived or jeopardised masculinity. Defining Fincher's structures. The inadequacy structure, to start with, This structure concentrates on representing the protagonist to be in an already inadequate position, and the spectator can identify this from the beginning of the film. In the same way as the deprivation structure, this structure is also concerned with the accomplishment of challenges, tasks, and obstacles. In other words, throughout the narrative, the protagonist is trying to reach a higher position of power and reconstruct their already fractured masculinity. The deprivation structure. This structure takes a different approach. The protagonist is seen to be in an immediate position of power. More importantly, their masculinity does not first appear to be in a fragile condition. It is only after, when some kind of intervention takes place, that their masculinity becomes in a state of crisis because it is being deprived from them in some way. Some examples of the deprivation structure. In the game, Nicholas Van Orton is a rich and successful banker who is arrogant, snide, and impatient. His masculinity is firstly witnessed to be intact. As the narrative develops, the viewer realises that Nicholas is haunted by the memory of his father's suicide, and he is also divorced and lonely. Nicholas's life is then systematically taken apart by a mysterious company, and this company has set up life-threatening games that Nicholas must complete. The accomplishment of these games will restore his deprivation, and it will also become his salvation from self-destruction, because his initial position of power has been deprived from him. In the neo-noir detective film Seven, both protagonists are symbols of authority because of their job status. The spectator becomes aware that Summerfield made his ex-wife have an abortion, which he regrets. Both detectives begin to bond, and Summerfield's prime objective is to ensure the safety of Mills and his wife, because he seeks to make up for his previous family mistakes. However, the villain John Doe decapitates Mills' wife, which has damaged Summerfield's masculine strength because his suffering of family deprivation has now passed on to Mills. The deprivation structure can also be seen in Alien 3. An extremist Christian brotherhood is deprived of their beliefs when the alien turns up and kills everyone. Furthermore, it can also be seen in Gone Girl. The protagonist, Nick Dunn, is a depressed middle-aged man who is deprived of an exciting love life and therefore has an affair. Some examples of the inadequacy structure, which include Zodiac, The Social Network, and Fight Club. All of the lead characters in these films are firstly witnessed to be inadequate. Robert Graysmith is a divorced father and works as a cartoonist, and he is disliked amongst his colleagues and has no self-confidence. Robert feels compelled to work on the Zodiac murder case because in this way he can begin to build his strength and repair his broken virility. In The Social Network, Mark Zuckerberg gets dumped and insulted by his girlfriend Erica in the first scene. This immediately signifies weakness and loneliness. Mark becomes obsessed with his Facebook project. His obsession takes a hold of him, and as the narrative develops, he becomes ruthless, stopping at nothing and betraying his closest friends. The viewer realises that his obsession was due to his inability to manage his feelings because Erica dumped him, and his Facebook project was his answer, was his salvation, from his inadequacy. In Fight Club, Edward Norton's character is clearly inadequate, as he is first seen to be an insomniac and an extremist consumer. When he becomes a member of Fight Club, he is able to feel strong and confident. However, his character is pushed to further extremes when he must rescue Marla Singer and stop Brad Pitt's character's plan called Project Mayhem. The difference is, when the inadequacy structure is in motion, the protagonists usually volunteer or are willing to put themselves in situations of danger. In Zodiac, for example, Robert willingly tries to find out the identity of the serial killer, frequently putting himself in danger. Mark Zuckerberg places himself at willful risk to assure the completion of Facebook. In Fight Club, Norton's character takes part in some of Tyler Durden's criminal acts before he realises he has to stop it. Conversely, the differences that occur in the deprivation structure do not appear to be the same. The protagonists are either pressured to or forced to take part in these tasks. This is oppositional to the inadequacy structure, where all of the characters become involved by choice. Examples include the game. Nicholas is reluctant to sign up to the mysterious company. The girl with the dragon tattoo. Michael Blomkvist is a journalist who is pressured to investigate a missing niece. He didn't want to take the case initially. And finally, in Seven, Summerfield did not want to be partnered up with Mills. He was ordered to by his captain. Some theory now. Theorist Tim Edwards states masculinity may be in crisis due to its perceived tendency to implode into femininity. And I've shown a clip which is a good example of this, which can be seen in David Fincher's Fight Club. If any of you have seen Fight Club, you know that that's not actually from the film. I had some trouble finding the actual scene, but as you can see, in that particular scene, a group of men at a convention are hugging each other and crying, which to me seems like imploding into femininity. Moving on, Sally Robinson suggests that the white professional man is most likely to be in a state of crisis. This is because they suffer from what she describes as blockage, or the heavily repressed male rage. This can be noticed in Gone Girl. The protagonist, Nick Dunn, is depressed and troubled. We find out that he is cheating on his wife because he is unhappy and bored in his life. He is unable to express his ruthless feelings to his wife, Amy, and thus his masculinity is in a state of crisis because he has blockage from his inexpressiveness. Furthermore, his inexpressiveness is accentuated to the viewer in the very first use of dialogue, which is what I'm going to show you now.
When I think of my wife, I always think of her head. I picture cracking her lovely skull, unspooling her brains, trying to get answers. The primal questions of any marriage. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other?
As you can see there, through the voiceover, he's thinking it, which shows his inexpressiveness, and his ruthless feelings are obviously quite damaged. Just bear with us. No, it's all right. Next one. I think that's cool. So, in addition, Fitzgerald specifies on Fight Club and posits marriage might be the answer to their melancholia. This may be true because elements of tension and competition between Norton's character and Brad Pitt's character can be identified when both attempt to win or possess Marla. Fitzgerald's statement could be extended when critically analysing Fincher's authorial signature. Instead of marriage, I see a recurring theme to win the woman that most commonly appears in the deprivation structure. In the game, Nicholas is set to win the heart of Christine. In Seven, both Summerfield and Mills realise their mission is demolished when they fail to keep Mills' wife alive. In Gone Girl, Nick must misrepresent his feelings about his wife for the sake of media publicity, when in fact he truly wants to win the heart of his mistress, Andy. In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Michael has a physical relationship with the female protagonist, Elizabeth, but defies her in the end of the film to reconnect the relationship with his wife. Therefore, sexuality appears to be a large part of Fincher's critique that may be an unreachable answer to, as Fitzgerald says, their melancholia. But in this case, the melancholia would apply of Fincher's male characters. Peter Williams stresses the use of antinomic pairs or ideological binaries that can be identified in a director's work. I want to stress that femininity is not absent in Fincher's films. Williams stresses that directors will present antinomic pairs within a body of films that works with or against each other. For example, masculinity versus femininity, and this is actually a recurring theme in Fincher's films that can be seen in Alien 3, the female protagonist versus the Christian Brotherhood, in Gone Girl, Nick Dunn versus his wife Amy Dunn, masculinity and femininity, and in Fight Club, Marla Singer versus Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. However, this antinomic theme tends to appear in the deprivation structure. Another recurring pair is age versus youth that can also be seen in some of Fincher's films. In Seven, Summerfield represents age, whereas Mills represents youth. Also in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, this film is a clear battle of age versus youth, but shown primarily through one character. In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Michael represents youth, and the villain Martin Banger represents age. These antinomic pairs become a part of Fincher's critique of masculinity, along with other cinematic processes and techniques that I mentioned earlier. To conclude, the ideological binaries and the structures that Fincher establishes within his films becomes a tool for his critique on masculinity. His cinematic vision, or his camera stilo, or thematic preoccupations, whichever critical auteur phrase you wish to choose, Fincher ultimately creates a dark, melancholic, and sinister depiction of masculinity. Through the use of his narratives and characters, masculinity is challenged and tested, and this cinematic process can be identified in Fincher's oeuvre, and thus his authorial signature is constructed and established. Thank you.